We're sitting down with Senator Joe Schiavoni here in Steubenville at Scaffidi's. Welcome and thanks for making this time for us.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
You just mentioned off microphone here that yesterday, the walkout, the March on Washington and the walkout. Why is this an issue for you? Why did you participate in the walkout?
Well, some students from the Youngstown City schools asked me if I would participate, and so I went to help them voice their First Amendment rights and heard a lot of very deep concerns that students had, not only in the Mahoning Valley, but across the country yesterday. I mean, they want to feel safe when they're going to school. And as legislators, we have to provide that safety. And we have to work with the federal government. States need to work with the federal government in order to make it happen. So we got to keep having conversations. They deserve it. And, you know, as a dad with 2 little boys, I don't want to feel nervous when I'm dropping my kids off at school. When I went to high school, when I went to middle school, when I went to grade school, I never felt nervous about a gunman coming in. I was worried about learning, trying to have fun with my friends, trying to make sure that I'm getting the experience necessary in order to prepare myself for the future, but not worrying about whether or not somebody's going to come into my school and shoot me.
You mentioned they're exercising their First Amendment rights, and coincidentally enough, it has to do with the Second Amendment as well. And I think there are concerns with each in terms of folks seeing where they encroach on the other. Talk about your legislative efforts in the Senate and what you would do to either parlay those efforts or strengthen those efforts that you had going on at the state level.
I've been pushing for years for increased funding for school safety. You know, the schools have been starved out because Columbus has taken all the money and given it back in tax cuts, and they haven't invested it in public schools or into local government. And when you do that, then schools are left begging their residents for additional funding. You know, so I pushed 4 years ago to put an additional $35 million into all 88 counties across all the school districts, spread out so that each school district could actually have an opportunity to receive a grant for school safety, whether it was to hire an additional resource officer, whether it was to hire an additional guidance counselor, whether it was to upgrade your locks and windows or go after a new communication system. We need to give some more resources to our schools. Now, that doesn't solve the problem. That's just one piece of it. Then you have to talk about guns. You know, we were talking about red flag laws. We were talking about closing gun show loopholes, making sure that we have mental health as a part of background checks. And at the end of the day, talking about what kind of guns we want civilians to be able to have. You have to have the conversation. It has to be from start to finish. I tell people that if we go back to our districts and not do something about guns before June, we're letting the people down. And I mean that. So I'm going to be standing up in Columbus and making sure that we do something to make students feel safer in schools. And it just has to be something along that spectrum, but have a conversation about everything.
There's another aspect that folks are having anxiety with. That's the minimum wage I wanted to mention here in terms of your introduction to that legislation. Why revisit this? Why now? And why do you think this is an issue worth tackling in the Senate at least?
Look, we have people making minimum wage that are working, taking care of the elderly. They're working very, very difficult jobs in some light manufacturing facilities. We got guys making 10, 11 bucks that are grinding every single day. I'm not talking about raising the minimum wage to $15 in 5 minutes. We're talking about starting at 12 and stepping to 15 over the next decade. That way you can work with the business community and help them embrace that. Now, you have to invest in the business side as well so that they'll be able to pay those wages. So you help them with grants, you help them with loans, you work with the business community to give them the tools necessary to be able to field that team. And so you got to train people so that the folks have the skills necessary to fill the jobs. And if you pay them a little bit more, you have long-term employees rather than short-term and a lot of scattering like you see in the medical field.
What do you say to critics that any move like that, even if staggered or gradually implemented, would throw our economy out of whack in terms of buying ability in a recession?
I think it would if you just threw it up today and said you got to pay $15 to all your workers and we're not going to help you as a business community at all. It is a step over the next decade. You start at 12 and you slowly move up. But when I was talking to a guy that owned a home health care agency today, he's saying, look, Joe, I get what you're saying, but there has to be a reinvestment in Medicaid expansion, making sure the reimbursement rates match, because right now we're only getting $17 an hour from the state, so how would we pay somebody $15? I understand that. I've been talking about making sure that the reimbursements are set in a way that these companies actually want to take Medicaid patients. And at the end of the day, we have people that are living healthier lifestyles. But when the goal is to tax cut from Columbus and not invest in your people, this is what happens. Every year we're in Columbus, they're talking about billion-dollar tax giveaways, LLC loophole tax cuts, but they don't invest in people. They don't invest in workforce development. They don't invest in Medicaid expansion. You don't invest in the things that are necessary in order to give people opportunities through education and workforce development.
You mentioned education there. Let's pin back to schools for a moment. You've been critical of charter schools and online schools. How so?
For-profit charter schools have been ripping off parents and kids for the past decade. If you're a for-profit school, that means that you're out there trying to make money. You're not out there trying to educate. If you're a non-profit charter school, it makes sense to me. If you want to start a different kind of school and you got a bunch of people with money and they throw it in a pot and say we're going to create a school, and the goal is not to make money, it's to actually do something different, and the results are better, hard to argue against that. But what we're seeing is rich people that create schools and then make more money off the kids and provide a substandard education. You see that through white hat management. You've seen that through ECOT. It's about not only the brick and mortar schools, but the electronic schools that are failing our kids, and they're making money in the process.
What can be done? I don't think charter schools will go away anytime soon, but what can be done about the existing model and that for-profit model?
I've pushed legislation since 2011 regarding this issue. We finally started to see some progress with closure laws, because what was happening is you could be ABC charter school one day, close down, then become XYZ Academy the next day. So we put some provisions in place. I pressured a lot of the Republicans to get this done over the past 6 years, and the people did as well, because people were getting frustrated that their taxpayer dollars were following that student out of that school and into a for-profit model. And once people realize that, they think they're paying their taxes to the city schools where they live. They didn't realize that those dollars were going to the electronic classroom or going to that charter school. And that created a lot of backlash, not only in Democratic districts, but in Republicans' districts as well. So we passed something in 2015 in order to shore it up a little bit. We just got to keep working on it and keep fighting for it.
It's on your campaign model. It hasn't been much in the national news since November or so. In terms of health care at the state level and the federal level, what's your platform and what's your proposal to increase access to health care, Medicaid expansion, or lack thereof?
Yeah, I talked about that a little bit earlier. You know, just because you're giving somebody a card that says they have Medicaid, it doesn't mean anything. You have to invest in the program. You have to invest in the model. And what I mean by that is that reimbursement rate is so important when it comes to home health care, when it comes to dentistry, when it comes to physical therapy, when it comes to that primary care doctor. And if the state isn't reimbursing the doc in a way that makes sense for them to take Medicaid patients, then nobody takes them. And so it ends up that they go to the same place they were before Medicaid expansion, and that's the ER. And then you have the ERs that are overfilled, and they're not able to provide the care necessary for those patients. So if you're going to do Medicaid expansion, which I think it's a good idea to give people the opportunity to live a healthier lifestyle, mostly working poor folks making $10 to $15 an hour, it's a good thing, but you got to invest in that reimbursement rate, or else it's just a talking point.
Should health insurance cover for opioid treatment?
It should, and I think that we've done a lot when it's gone to Medicaid expansion to help people with treatment, but it's not just about 30 days and out. The bill that I proposed utilized the rainy day fund, 10% of the Ohio's rainy day fund, to invest in education for kids, making sure people have that rehabilitation, but then on the back end, they have that help, that safety net, that ability to reconnect with their family, beefing up our foster care system to help our kids, giving kids opportunities if their parents are struggling. We have to invest in that. At the same time, we got to lock these guys up that are selling fentanyl and these drugs that are killing people. So all this stuff, again, it's not one thing, it's not this or that, it's all the stuff. And you got to do it all at the same time or it doesn't work. So that's why I was trying to propose that bill, not only this year, but in the years past, in order to really get that investment in not just the 30 days and out, but that reconnection into society, that job retraining, that housing piece, giving people that stable life that they had prior to their addiction. Because a lot of the people that experience this addiction, they're not bad people. You know, they're people that I represented as a workers' comp lawyer that got prescribed drugs and took it just like the doc said. But this stuff was powerful and they didn't know. Or it was a kid that made a bad decision at a party to take a pill one night, never knew or expected that he would become a heroin addict that's shooting drugs in their veins that can kill them in one shot. So we got to work with them and try to rebuild their life.
Lastly, I want to touch on something that affects us all, or at least there's no demographic sliced up by this. I'm talking about infrastructure. Most of the stories I cover every other day, it's either a road or a bridge story. What's your take on rebuilding or at least repairing Ohio's roads and bridges and how to pay for it?
Well, we have to do it. I mean, President Trump promised $1 trillion infrastructure rebuild, and then he said, well, $750 billion have to be local match, and we'll do $250. That's not $1 trillion infrastructure rebuild. That is just putting on the backs of the locals again, and that's just a talking point that he made in his campaign, and people have to understand that. I've been proposing a bill, a bond issue, to invest $200 million a year for 5 years in underground infrastructure. You know, we have a lot of lead pipes underneath the ground. In these industrial communities like Steubenville and Youngstown and Canton and Akron, we're sitting on these pipes that are bursting every single day. People don't even see it until it happens, then they fix it, and then they throw some chemicals in the water so it doesn't eat the lead pipe and call it a fix. That's not a fix. We got to rebuild our underground infrastructure, putting our tradesmen back to work, and that way we're building for the future. So it's not just about roads and bridges, but it's also about underground infrastructure. And we have to prioritize that as something that we're investing in at the state level. Again, the Republicans have been utilizing tax cuts as the way to spur the economy. And they'll claim that given this $1 billion a year back to the highest earners, then gets reinvested. But I talk about investing in education, infrastructure, and job training first. And if there's actually money left over, then you can do a tax cut. But when you give it all away at the beginning, you don't have any money to invest. And infrastructure is a problem that you can see every day when you're driving and when we have these water breaks underneath the ground.
You've been very active in the Senate with these legislative efforts, and it seems like you could do a lot of work there still. Why are you running for governor?
Well, I'm termed out this year. So I started in 2009. I was appointed. I ran in 10. I ran in 14. Last year, I said, look, we're going to run for governor because I believe we can make a difference. I believe that speaking to people across the state for the last 9 years, I understand what people want. And all it is, it's simple. They want a good school for their kids. They want a good opportunity to make a few bucks. They want to be able to go to the doctors when they're sick. They want basic things in this state, and we fail to invest in it. That's why all the bills that I'm talking about, that creates the platform. I don't have to make this stuff up. I don't have to have some political expert telling me what to say. This is stuff that I've been living every single day, and I want to make a difference for my family and the people's families across the state. And we're going to keep doing it until we get it done. The primary is less than 2 months away. And so every day we're in a different community, continuing to do the same thing I was doing 10 years ago when I got appointed, talking to people about what's important to them and trying to put something in place to help them.
Finally, looking at Governor Kasich's administration, what would you do differently if you were in there the past 2 to 4 years? Or what do you hoped that this administration would have done differently over the past 4 years?
I talked about it a little bit earlier. It's that lack of investment. It's that lack of investment into our people. You know, you can drive from one community to the other and see these industrial brownfields up and down the river and across Lake Erie. As a state, we have to invest in cleaning up our state. We have to invest in providing reliable internet to people. We have to invest in our schools, starting at universal pre-K, to give every student an opportunity, no matter who their parents are or what city they're born. Everybody deserves that same opportunity, and that hasn't been occurring under Governor Kasich. He all of a sudden became kind of moderate when he was running for president. But he was also the same guy that said, get on the bus or the bus is going to run you over, when they went after collective bargaining rights for union folks across the state in 2011. So people have to be reminded that he did shift his ways a little bit, but he's been very, very tough on organized labor. He starved out local governments and public schools, and that's why you'll see these levies every single year being begged for more money for at the local level because the state has not made that investment. So it's about changing that priority. It's about investing first and trying to really help people give them good opportunities.
Why should someone vote for you?
Well, I think the time is now for something different. You know, I'm 38 years old. I come from Youngstown. You know, we've had politicians that have been in this forever. You got DeWine, who's in his 70s. You got Cordray in his 60s. Dennis Kucinich in his 70s. People want somebody different. They want somebody different that actually has a plan, a good plan for the future of Ohio. They also need somebody that knows how to listen. That's what I do. You listen and then you build plans based on the needs of your people. And when I'm talking to people, I don't go in there with notes. I don't go in there with an agenda. It's about how we can connect and how we can help and how we can build a stronger state. And I think that's what people are seeing about this campaign. It's that real, genuine feeling that somebody's in this for the right reasons.
Senator, thanks for your time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Good.